They are the farthest any human has been from Earth in more than half a century. Right now, as you read these words, four astronauts aboard the Orion spacecraft are hurtling through the void at nearly 25,000 miles per hour, farther out than Apollo 13 ever reached, with nothing but the moon's ancient silence ahead and the fragile blue marble of Earth shrinking behind them. This is not science fiction. This is April 2026. This is Artemis II. And for the first time since 1972, humanity has dared to leave the safety of low Earth orbit and return to the domain of the moon. For more than 50 years, the moon has waited. It has watched in cold silence as humanity built space stations, sent robots to Mars, and filled low Earth orbit with satellites, yet never again sent its children beyond the thin veil of Earth's magnetic field. That long silence ends now. In the spring of 2026, the Artemis II mission launched 4 astronauts, Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen, on a daring 10-day journey that would take them around the far side of the moon and back. No one has traveled this far since the Apollo era. No spacecraft designed for humans has flown this deep into space since 1972. This is more than a test flight. It is a declaration. A declaration that humanity is not finished with the moon. That we are ready, once again, to push outward. That the next chapter of exploration, one that includes sustainable lunar bases, resource utilization, and the eventual journey to Mars, has officially begun. Artemis II is not about planting flags or collecting rocks. It is about proving that we can live and work in deep space. It is about testing the Orion spacecraft under real lunar conditions with humans aboard. It is about showing the world that the moon is no longer a distant memory but the next stepping stone for our species. From the final frantic weeks of preparation on the ground, through the thunderous launch of the most powerful rocket ever built, across the lonely days of translunar coasting, to the heart-stopping moments when the crew lost all contact with Earth while swinging behind the far side of the moon, you will meet the astronauts not as flawless heroes, but as real people carrying the weight of history on their shoulders. You will feel the roar of the Space Launch System, the eerie quiet of deep space, and the emotional surge of seeing Earth rise from lunar distance. Above all, you will witness the awakening of a new era. Welcome to Artemis Awakens. The moon is calling. And this time, we are answering. The moon did not forget us. We simply forgot how badly we once wanted it. After Apollo 17's departure in December 1972, the grand American vision of lunar exploration collapsed almost overnight. The Vietnam War, economic turmoil, and shifting national priorities drained the momentum. NASA's budget was slashed. The remaining Saturn V rockets were turned into museum pieces. The lunar modules that had never flown were scrapped or left to rust. For a generation, the phrase, "we're going back to the moon," became almost a punchline, spoken by politicians during campaign seasons, then quietly forgotten once the votes were counted. But dreams, especially the biggest ones, have a stubborn way of refusing to die. In 2004, President George W. Bush announced the Constellation program, a bold plan to return astronauts to the moon by 2020 and eventually send them to Mars. New rockets, Ares I and Ares V, were designed. A new crew vehicle, Orion, began taking shape. For a few hopeful years, it looked like the wait was finally over. Then reality struck again. Cost overruns. Technical problems. A new administration with different priorities. In 2010, Constellation was cancelled. Orion survived, but barely. The program was reborn under a new name, with new goals, and, crucially, with stronger political staying power. That new program was called Artemis. Named after Apollo's mythological twin sister, Artemis was designed from the beginning to be different. It was designed to be a sustained, long-term campaign, not a sprint to plant a flag. The goal was no longer, go to the moon. The goal was, learn to live there. At its core was the most powerful rocket ever constructed, the Space Launch System, SLS. Standing taller than the Statue of Liberty, SLS would generate 8.8 million pounds of thrust at liftoff, more than the Saturn V. Paired with it was the Orion spacecraft, a deep space capsule capable of carrying 4 astronauts and keeping them alive for weeks far beyond Earth orbit. But rockets and capsules were only part of the story. Artemis brought together an unprecedented international coalition. The European Space Agency contributed the Orion service module. Canada provided the advanced robotic arm. Japan and others signed on for future lunar surface missions. Even commercial partners like SpaceX and Blue Origin were invited to play major roles in the broader architecture. The plan was ambitious and phased. Artemis I, 2022, an uncrewed test flight that successfully sent Orion around the moon and back, a flawless dress rehearsal. Artemis II, 2026, the first crewed flight, looping around the moon without landing, the mission that would prove humans could safely travel into space far once more. Artemis III, targeted for 2027 to 2028. The first crewed landing since Apollo 17, this time near the lunar South Pole where water ice hides in permanently shadowed craters. Beyond that are Gateway Station, permanent habitats, resource extraction, and the road to Mars. The journey to this point was anything but smooth. Delays piled up. The SLS rocket earned the nickname, the rocket that Congress built, because of its political protection and ballooning costs. Critics called it too expensive and too slow. Supporters argued it was the only rocket powerful enough to send Orion and meaningful payloads directly toward the moon in a single launch. Through political storms, pandemics, and technical setbacks, the Artemis program endured. Engineers worked around the clock. Astronauts trained for years in simulators, underwater neutral buoyancy labs, and harsh desert environments meant to mimic the lunar surface. And then, in early 2026, everything finally aligned. The 4 astronauts selected for Artemis II, Commander Reed Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, mission specialist Christina Koch, and mission specialist Jeremy Hansen, stepped forward as the crew that would break the 54-year drought. They were not just flying a mission. They were carrying the hopes of an entire generation that had grown up hearing, "We went to the moon," as ancient history. As the SLS stood ready on Launch Complex 39B at Kennedy Space Center, the world began to pay attention again. Social media lit up. Schools held watch parties. Children who had never known a time when humans walked on another world suddenly felt the pull of the cosmos. The long deferral was over. The dreams were no longer deferred. Artemis was awakening. And 4 human beings were about to ride that awakening straight out of Earth orbit, farther than any of us had gone in more than half a century. For distinct individuals, united by a singular, unbreakable bond, they were set to become the first humans to venture beyond Earth's orbit in over 50 years. Reed Wiseman, Commander. A naval aviator turned astronaut, Wiseman had already flown to the International Space Station in 2014. He carried the quiet confidence of a leader who had stared down danger in the cockpit and in space. Selected as commander of Artemis II, he knew the weight on his shoulders. "This isn't just another flight," he said in one of the final pre-launch interviews. "We're paving the way for future generations." Victor Glover, pilot. The first black astronaut to fly a long-duration mission to the ISS, Glover brought both technical mastery and a deep sense of historical moment. A father and a naval test pilot, he viewed Artemis II as the next logical step in expanding humanity's reach. "We're not just going for ourselves," he often reminded the team. "We're going so that future generations, of every background, can see themselves in the stars." Christina Koch, mission specialist. Koch already held the record for the longest single spaceflight by a woman, 328 days on the islands. An electrical engineer by training, she was known for her calm precision and relentless curiosity. She had waited years for this opportunity. For her, Artemis II represented something profoundly personal. Proving that deep space exploration was not reserved for a select few but open to those who dared to push the limits of human endurance. Jeremy Hansen, Mission Specialist, Canadian Space Agency. The first Canadian astronaut assigned to a lunar mission, Hansen brought international perspective and a philosopher's heart to the crew. A former fighter pilot and father of 5, he often spoke about the view from space changing how we see our shared home. When you go far enough away, he said, you realize Earth is the only home we have, and the moon is our first neighbor. We have a responsibility to both. Together, this crew represented more than 4 individuals. They embodied the new face of exploration, diverse, international, and deeply human. For years they had trained as a team. They endured survival training in the freezing wilderness of Canada, practiced emergency procedures in the neutral buoyancy lab, and spent countless hours inside Orion simulators learning every switch, every alarm, every possible failure mode of the spacecraft that would carry them farther from Earth than any human alive. They knew the risks. Orion had flown successfully around the moon without a crew during Artemis I. But no amount of simulation could fully prepare them for the real thing. The violence of launch on the most powerful rocket ever built, the weeks of deep space isolation, the loss of all communication while swinging behind the far side of the moon, and the fiery re-entry that would test every heat shield tile to its limit. Yet they were ready. In the final weeks before launch, the crew spent quiet moments with their families, wrote letters to be opened only if the worst happened, and took one last look at the night sky from Florida's coast. They understood that their mission was historic not because it was flashy but because it was necessary. Artemis II was the bridge between the Apollo era and the permanent lunar future. On launch morning, as they suited up in the crew quarters at Kennedy Space Center, Reed Wiseman looked at his crewmates and said simply, "Let's go wake her up. 4 astronauts. 1 spacecraft. A moon that had waited 54 years. The stage was set. The long quiet was about to end. The morning of April 1, 2026, dawned crisp and clear over Florida's space coast. At Launch Complex 39B, the Space Launch System stood like a modern-day colossus, 322 feet of gleaming white and orange metal, the most powerful rocket ever built by human hands. At its tip, the Orion spacecraft Integrity carried 4 astronauts who were about to make history. The crew had woken hours earlier. They had eaten their traditional steak and eggs breakfast, suited up in their sleek white pressure garments, and ridden the elevator to the top of the launch tower. One by one, they had climbed into Orion and strapped themselves into their seats, Wiseman in the commander's seat on the left, Glover as pilot on the right, Koch and Hansen in the 2 seats behind. Now, as the final countdown ticked down, the world held its breath. T-10. 9. 8. Inside Orion, the crew felt the vibration even before the engines ignited. Reed Wiseman's voice came calm and steady over the comm loop. Artemis II, we are go for launch. 3. 2. 1. Ignition. At that exact moment, 8.5 million pounds of thrust erupted from the 4 RS-25 main engines and the 2 solid rocket boosters. The sound was not merely loud, it was apocalyptic. A rolling thunder that shook the ground for miles around, rattling windows as far away as Orlando. A brilliant orange fireball bloomed beneath the rocket, turning night into day. Slowly, almost reluctantly at first, the SLS began to rise. Inside the capsule, the crew was slammed back into their seats with crushing force, nearly 3 Gs of acceleration pressing them down as the rocket clawed its way skyward. Victor Glover, fighting to keep his breathing steady, managed to say, "What a ride." Christina Koch smiled through the vibration. "We're moving." Jeremy Hansen, ever the poet among pilots, whispered, "The moon is waiting." The rocket thundered upward, piercing a thin layer of clouds. At 90 seconds, the solid rocket boosters separated with bright flashes and fell back toward the Atlantic in graceful arcs. The core stage continued burning, pushing Orion higher and faster. From the ground, millions watched live, on television, on phones, and on giant screens in schools and public squares across the planet. Children who had never seen a crewed launch cheered. Veterans of the Apollo era wiped away tears. For a brief, shining moment, the world was united in wonder. At T+8 minutes and 30 seconds, the core stage engines cut off. The upper stage ignited, delivering the final push needed to reach orbit. Then, silence. The crew floated gently against their straps as Orion entered its initial parking orbit around Earth. Reed Wiseman keyed his mic. Houston, Artemis II. We have a beautiful view of our home planet. And we are go for the next phase. Mission Control erupted in applause. But the real journey had only just begun. They were safely in space. The SLS had performed flawlessly, one of the most complex and powerful rockets ever flown, on its very first crewed attempt. Now came the hard part. In the next few hours, Orion would perform a series of burns to raise its orbit, test its systems, and prepare for the most critical maneuver of all, the translunar injection burn that would fling them out of Earth's gravitational embrace and toward the Moon. The thunder of launch had awakened the world. Now, the long, quiet voyage into deep space would test everything, the machine, the crew, and the very limits of human courage. The thunder of launch faded into memory within minutes. Now, in the smooth silence of orbit, Artemis II became something far more delicate, a ballet of precision engineering and human adaptability. Orion integrity circled the Earth every 90 minutes, moving from blinding daylight into the ink-black shadow of night in the blink of an eye. Inside the capsule, the 4 astronauts unstrapped and began the careful dance of zero gravity. Reed Wiseman floated toward the center of the cabin, his body rotating slowly as he checked the attitude control thrusters. Systems look nominal, he reported to Houston. We're getting our space legs back. Victor Glover, already moving with the ease of a veteran, tested the environmental control system. Life support is steady. CO2 levels good. Temperature holding at 72 degrees. Feels like home, except the view is a lot better. Christina Koch worked methodically through the checklist for the Orion service module, the European-built powerhouse that would provide propulsion, power, and life support for the long journey ahead. Every switch, every valve, every sensor had to be verified before they committed to leaving Earth orbit forever. Jeremy Hansen, meanwhile, had the most visually stunning task. He maneuvered into position at the spacecraft's windows and began photographing Earth. Not for science alone, but for the billions watching back home. You can see the entire coastline of Africa right now, he said during a live downlink. It's humbling. Makes you realize how connected we all are. The crew spent the next several hours in what Mission Control called the Earth Orbit Ballet. They ran diagnostics on the heat shield, tested the docking mechanisms that would one day connect Orion to the lunar gateway, practiced emergency procedures, and even took turns using the spacecraft's compact toilet, a task that proved both technically challenging and comically humbling in weightlessness. Small issues appeared, as they always do in space. A minor glitch in one of the attitude thrusters required a quick workaround. The crew adapted instantly, their training kicking in like muscle memory. Christina Koch's engineering background shone as she helped troubleshoot the issue with calm precision. From Mission Control in Houston, flight directors watched every data point with intense focus. This was Orion's first time carrying humans into space. Every system had to prove itself before the next critical step. The translunar injection, TLA, burn. As the hours passed, the crew stole moments to simply look out the windows. The view was mesmerizing. They watched auroras dancing over the poles, massive thunderstorms lighting up continents, and the thin blue line of Earth's atmosphere glowing against the blackness of space. Victor Glover captured the feeling best during one downlink. You spend your whole life training for this, but nothing prepares you for how fragile and beautiful Earth looks from up here. It makes you want to protect it, and reach farther at the same time. As their final orbit before the big burn approached, the mood inside Orion shifted from excitement to focused determination. Reed Wiseman gathered the crew for a quiet moment. We've done everything we can in orbit. The machine is ready. We're ready. Next stop, the moon. The ballet was ending. The real voyage, the long, lonely coast across the empty sea between Earth and its satellite, was about to begin. In less than 2 hours, the Orion service module engine would ignite for the translunar injection burn, a single, decisive push that would break them free of Earth's gravity and set them on a path no human crew had followed since 1972. The point of no return was coming. The Earth orbit ballet was over. Now came the moment that would separate Artemis II from every human spaceflight since Apollo 17. The crew had one final orbit to complete. Inside Orion, the atmosphere was electric with quiet intensity. Checklists were triple verified. The service module's main engine, the powerful European-built propulsion system that would do the heavy lifting for the rest of the mission, was brought to full readiness. Mission Control in Houston counted down the final seconds with clinical precision. Artemis II, you are go for translunar injection. Reed Wiseman, hands steady on the controls, responded calmly, copy, Houston. We are ready. The burn window opened exactly on time. With a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the entire spacecraft, Orion's service module engine ignited. A brilliant blue-white flame, hotter than the surface of the sun, erupted from the nozzle. The crew was pressed firmly back into their seats, not the crushing force of launch, but a sustained, deliberate 0.3 G push that would last nearly 18 minutes. This was no ordinary engine firing. This was the translunar injection burn, the single most critical maneuver of the entire mission. It would increase their velocity by more than 3,000 miles per hour, enough to break free of Earth's gravitational grip and hurl them onto a precise trajectory toward the moon. Victor Glover monitored the engine performance closely. Thrust is nominal. Fuel flow steady. Christina Koch watched the navigation display as their trajectory arc stretched outward on the screen, reaching farther and farther from Earth with every passing second. We're climbing, crossing 20,000 miles now. Jeremy Hansen, ever attuned to the human side, glanced out the window as the brilliant curve of Earth began to shrink noticeably. It's happening, he said softly. We're really leaving. Inside Mission Control, the tension was palpable. Flight controllers leaned forward in their seats, eyes locked on telemetry. Years of planning, billions of dollars, and the hopes of a new generation of explorers all rested on this one burn performing perfectly. The engine continued its steady roar. The crew felt the spacecraft accelerating, pushing them outward on a path that would take them nearly 240,000 miles from home. Then, after 17 minutes and 42 seconds of flawless operation, the engine cut off. Silence returned. Reed Wiseman checked the navigation computer one last time and keyed his microphone. Houston, Artemis II. Translunar injection complete. We are on our way to the moon. A cheer erupted in Mission Control that could be heard across the world. The burn had been perfect, placing Orion on the exact trajectory needed for a safe lunar flyby. The crew was now committed. There was no turning back. No abort option that could easily return them to Earth orbit. They had crossed an invisible line in space, the point of no return, and were now truly outbound, coasting on momentum through the vast emptiness between two worlds. As the adrenaline slowly ebbed, the crew floated to the windows and looked back. Earth, once filling their entire view, was now visibly smaller, a beautiful, fragile blue and white marble suspended in the infinite black. Christina Koch captured the moment best during the post-burn downlink. We just took the biggest step humanity has taken in over 50 years. The moon is calling, and we're answering. 4 astronauts. 1 perfect burn. A journey of nearly 4 days ahead. The long voyage had truly begun. With the translunar injection burn complete, the roar of engines gave way to the profound silence of deep space. Orion integrity now coasted at nearly 25,000 miles per hour on a gentle arc toward the moon. There would be no more major burns for days, only the quiet, steady fall along gravity's invisible highway. For 4 astronauts, this was the heart of the mission, the long voyage. The days blended into a rhythm unlike anything they had experienced before. Each morning, according to the spacecraft clock set to Houston time, the crew woke to a gentle alarm and began their routine. They prepared simple meals, rehydrated food packets and tortillas, and floated together in the small cabin for what they called family dinner. Laughter echoed more often than one might expect in such isolation. Victor Glover's quick humor kept spirits high, while Jeremy Hansen shared quiet reflections on what it meant to see Earth from this new distance. Christina Koch led most of the science activities. She carefully tended to the small biological experiments aboard, plant growth in microgravity, radiation monitoring, and fluid behavior studies that would help design future lunar habitats. Every few hours, she floated to the radiation sensors and noted the increased exposure compared to low Earth orbit. "We're truly beyond the magnetosphere now," she reported. "This is the environment we'll face on the way to Mars." Reed Wiseman divided his time between system checks and Earth observations. He spent long periods at the optical quality windows, capturing high-resolution images and video for the science team back home. As the hours passed, Earth continued to shrink. What had once been a vast, detailed world became a delicate blue marble, then a bright point of light that could be covered with a thumbnail. Communications with Houston introduced a new reality, the delay. As they traveled farther, radio signals took longer to travel the growing distance. What started as seconds became minutes. The crew began to feel the psychological weight of true isolation. No instant replies. No immediate help if something went wrong. They were on their own in a way no ISS crew had ever been. Yet the crew bonded in ways that surprised even them. They shared stories from their lives. Childhood dreams of space, family moments they missed, and the quiet fears they carried. Jeremy Hansen often read poetry or played soft music over the intercom during quiet hours. Christina Koch taught the others simple yoga stretches adapted for zero gravity. Victor Glover kept a running, space playlist that mixed classic rock with modern beats. Outside the windows, the view evolved hour by hour. The moon grew larger and more detailed. Its craters, Maria, and rugged highlands becoming sharp and three-dimensional. The sun cast harsh, unfiltered light, creating dramatic shadows across the lunar surface that no atmosphere softened. One evening, as they passed the halfway point, Reed Wiseman gathered the crew for a private moment. Floating together near the center of the cabin, he spoke softly. "We're farther from home than any humans have been in over 50 years. But look at what we've done. 4 people from different backgrounds and different countries, working as one. This is what the future looks like." The long voyage tested their endurance, their patience, and their trust in the machine that carried them. Minor issues arose, a temperamental fan, a slight temperature fluctuation, but nothing the well-trained crew couldn't handle. As the 4th day drew to a close, the moon loomed large and imposing. Its gravity was beginning to tug at them more strongly than Earth's. The crew knew the most historic moments were still ahead. Tomorrow they would break the Apollo 13 distance record. Soon after, they would lose all contact with Earth as they swung behind the far side of the moon. The long, peaceful coast was ending. The moon's silent face awaited. Monday, April 6, 2026. The moment arrived quietly, almost without fanfare inside the spacecraft. Reed Wiseman checked the navigation display for the 3rd time, then turned to his crew with a slow, proud smile. "Gentlemen and lady, we just broke the record." At 252,756 miles from Earth, Orion Integrity had officially traveled farther than Apollo 13 ever had in 1970. The 4 astronauts had become the most distant humans in history. There was no cheering or loud celebration. Instead, a profound, almost reverent silence filled the cabin. They floated together to the windows and looked back at the tiny blue world they had left behind. Earth had shrunk to the size of a marble, beautiful, fragile, and impossibly alone in the cosmic dark. The Pacific Ocean caught the sunlight in a brilliant flash, while the night side sparkled with the faint lights of cities. It was a view no human eye had seen since 1972. Victor Glover broke the silence first, his voice thick with emotion. "Look at her. That's everything we've ever known, everyone we've ever loved, all of human history, right there in that little dot." Christina Koch pressed her hand gently against the window. "It changes you. You think you understand how vast space is, but until you see Earth this small, you don't really feel it." Jeremy Hansen, the philosopher of the crew, spoke softly. "We're not just farther from home. We're farther than any human has ever been. This distance belongs to us now, and to everyone who dreams of going farther." For the next several hours, the crew took turns at the windows, capturing photographs and video, speaking live to Earth, with the increasing time delay, and simply absorbing the historic weight of the moment. They read messages sent from schoolchildren around the world, from world leaders, and from the families they had left behind. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Artemis II breaks deep space record, flashed across every major network. Schools held special assemblies. Social media exploded with images of the tiny Earth shared by the crew. For a brief time, political differences and daily worries faded as people looked up at the moon with renewed wonder. Inside Orion, the mood was a mixture of pride and deepening humility. They performed additional radiation measurements and ran more engineering tests, but the real work of the day was reflection. Reed Wiseman recorded a personal message for future generations. "We didn't come this far to plant a flag or claim territory. We came to prove that humanity can survive and thrive beyond our home planet. If 4 of us can do this, then thousands, then millions, can follow. The moon is not the end. It is only the beginning." As the hours passed, the moon continued to grow larger and more commanding in their view. Its ancient, cratered face now dominated the sky ahead. The far side, the side humanity had never walked upon, was slowly rotating into view. The record-breaking moment was behind them. The true test of the mission, the dramatic lunar flyby and the loss of signal behind the moon, lay just ahead. For humans had pushed the boundary of human exploration farther than anyone alive had ever gone. Now they were preparing to go even deeper into the unknown. The moon filled their entire world. Orion was now racing just 4,067 miles above the lunar surface, closer than many commercial flights fly above Earth. The far side, forever hidden from our planet, unfolded beneath them in all its raw, untouched majesty. This was the heart of the mission. As the spacecraft approached the point of closest approach, the crew fell into a focused hush. Reed Wiseman and Victor Glover monitored the trajectory with intense concentration while Christina Koch and Jeremy Hansen captured high-resolution imagery and video for science teams back home. The far side looked nothing like the familiar near side they had seen from Earth. It was rugged, heavily cratered, and scarred by billions of years of cosmic bombardment. No dark lava seas softened its face. Instead, bright highlands and deep, ancient basins stretched endlessly below. Then came the moment they had trained for and feared. Loss of signal, LOS. As Orion swung behind the moon, the lunar mass blocked all radio communication with Earth. For nearly 45 minutes, the 4 astronauts would be completely cut off from humanity, the most isolated humans in history. The comm channel went silent. Inside the capsule, the only sounds were the gentle hum of life support systems and their own breathing. No mission control. No family voices. No real-time guidance. Reed Wiseman looked at his crew and spoke quietly. "We're on our own now. Let's make it count." They pressed against the windows, eyes wide with wonder. The moon's surface rolled by in silent, breathtaking detail. Jeremy Hansen whispered, almost to himself, "It's so quiet. Like the whole universe is holding its breath." Christina Koch activated the high-resolution cameras, documenting features never before seen by human eyes at this distance. Victor Glover kept a steady hand on the controls, ready for any tiny trajectory correction if needed. The moon had done its work. As Orion emerged from behind the far side, the lunar gravity well acted like a cosmic slingshot, accelerating the spacecraft and bending its trajectory back toward Earth. No engine burn was needed for this elegant maneuver. Gravity alone provided the free ride home. The crew felt the subtle but unmistakable shift. The moon, which had dominated their sky for hours, began to recede. Earth, once a tiny marble, started to grow again. Slowly at first, then with increasing speed. Inside the capsule, the mood was a mixture of relief and quiet triumph. The most visually spectacular and emotionally charged phase of the mission was behind them. Now came the long coast home, with final tests and preparations for the dangerous return through Earth's atmosphere. Reed Wiseman keyed the microphone with a calm, satisfied tone. "Houston, Artemis II. Lunar flyby complete. Gravity assist successful. We're on the return trajectory." Mission Control responded with warmth and pride, the time delay now shrinking as they headed home. "Copy that, Artemis II. The world is celebrating with you." The crew used the return leg to complete remaining science objectives. Christina Koch ran additional radiation and biological experiments, gathering data that would prove vital for future long-duration missions to Mars. Victor Glover conducted more spacecraft systems checks, ensuring every component had performed as expected in the harsh environment of deep space. Jeremy Hansen spent much of his time documenting the changing view. As Earth grew larger hour by hour, he captured time-lapse sequences showing their home planet transforming from a distant point of light back into the familiar, life-filled world they knew. The crew also took time for reflection. They recorded personal messages for their families and for schoolchildren around the world. Reed Wiseman spoke directly to the next generation of explorers. "We went farther than anyone in over 50 years, not because we were special, but because we dared. The moon is waiting for all of you. Keep looking up." Small challenges kept them sharp. A brief fluctuation in one power bus required quick troubleshooting. The increasing communications delay, now shortening again, reminded them how isolated they had truly been. Through it all, the crew's training and camaraderie carried them forward. As the days passed, Earth continued to swell in their windows, first a bright crescent, then a full, glowing orb wrapped in swirling clouds and oceans. The sight filled them with a renewed sense of purpose and humility. The slingshot was working perfectly. Orion was gaining speed on its return path, hurtling toward the Pacific Ocean at nearly 25,000 miles per hour. But the easiest part of the journey was over. The most dangerous phase still lay ahead. The fiery plunge back into Earth's atmosphere at speeds that would heat the spacecraft's heat shield to nearly 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The crew began final preparations, stowing equipment, reviewing re-entry procedures, and mentally steeling themselves for the violent ride home. Gravity had embraced them once more. Now it was time to survive its fiery kiss. The long coast home was over. Orion integrity was now screaming toward Earth at nearly 25,000 miles per hour, faster than any crewed vehicle had traveled since the Apollo era. The crew had one final, brutal test to survive, the fiery return through Earth's atmosphere. Reed Wiseman's voice came steady over the comm as the spacecraft oriented itself heat shield first. "Houston, Artemis II. We are going for the entry interface." The capsule began to shake as it kissed the upper atmosphere. Within seconds, the shaking turned violent. Outside, air molecules slammed into the heat shield at hypersonic speeds, compressing and heating until the temperature soared toward 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, nearly 3,000 degrees Celsius. A brilliant orange plasma sheath engulfed Orion, cutting off all communications once again. Inside, the crew was pressed hard into their seats by the rapidly building G-forces, peaking at more than 6 Gs. The capsule rattled and roared as if it were coming apart. Victor Glover fought to keep his breathing controlled. "We're in the fire now." Christina Koch monitored the internal displays as best she could through the vibration. Heat shield holding. G-forces nominal. Jeremy Hansen kept his eyes on the horizon as the plasma glow lit up the cabin with an otherworldly orange light. For several long, tense minutes, they were completely alone, riding a man-made meteor through the sky. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the plasma started to fade. The communications blackout ended. "Houston, Artemis II. We are through the plasma. Chutes will deploy shortly." The world watched in collective tension as the drogue parachutes deployed first, followed by the 3 massive main parachutes. They blossomed like giant white flowers against the blue sky, slowing the capsule from hundreds of miles per hour to a gentle descent. Orion splashed down in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego, California, sending up a massive spray of white water. Recovery teams were already on station, helicopters circling, ships moving in quickly. The crew felt the gentle rocking of the ocean waves for the first time in 10 days. Reed Wiseman keyed the mic one last time from inside the capsule. "Houston. Artemis II is home." The hatch was opened. Fresh sea air rushed in. The first natural air the astronauts had breathed in days. One by one, the 4 heroes were helped out, waving weakly but smiling broadly as they were placed into recovery chairs. Medical teams checked their vital signs while the world celebrated. Global cheers erupted. World leaders offered congratulations. Children who had followed every moment of the mission jumped with joy. The crew had done what many thought impossible, they had safely taken humanity back to the moon and returned. As they were flown to shore, the astronauts looked out at the Earth they had just circumnavigated from deep space. Christina Koch later described the feeling: "You leave as explorers, and you return knowing the future is already being written." The mission was complete. Data from Orion systems, the crew's observations, and the science experiments would now shape every mission that followed: Artemis III's landing, the lunar gateway, and eventually the road to Mars. But for now, astronauts simply breathed Earth's air again, feeling the warmth of the sun on their faces and the solid ground beneath their feet. They had gone farther than any human in more than half a century. And they had come home. The splashdown marked the end of one journey, and the true beginning of another. Artemis II had done everything it was asked to do and more. The SLS rocket had performed flawlessly on its first crewed flight. Orion had carried humans safely to lunar distance and back. The crew had broken deep space records, observed the far side of the moon with their own eyes, survived the harshest re-entry in decades, and returned with a treasure trove of data that would shape humanity's future in space for generations. But the real awakening was bigger than any single mission. For the first time in over half a century, humanity had proven it could still venture beyond low Earth orbit with a crew. The psychological, technical, and operational lessons learned during those 10 days would ripple outward. Engineers now knew exactly how Orion behaved with humans aboard in deep space. Scientists had fresh radiation data from beyond the Van Allen belts. Mission planners had real-world confirmation that international crews could function harmoniously under extreme isolation. The road ahead suddenly felt real. Artemis III was already in motion. Targeting a crewed landing near the lunar South Pole by 2027 or 2028, where water ice and permanently shadowed craters could one day fuel rockets and sustain habitats. The Lunar Gateway Station would soon orbit the Moon, serving as a waypoint for landings and long-term research. Commercial landers from SpaceX, Blue Origin, and others would join the effort, creating a vibrant cislunar economy. And beyond the Moon, Mars was no longer a distant dream whispered in conference rooms. It was the logical next horizon. The technologies tested on Artemis II, deep space life support, radiation protection, and high-speed re-entry, were the very building blocks needed for a multi-year journey to the Red Planet. More importantly, something intangible had shifted in the public consciousness. Children who watched the launch and flyby now dreamed of becoming astronauts in a way their parents never had. Universities reported surges in aerospace and STEM enrollment. Nations that had once watched from the sidelines began talking about their own contributions to a permanent lunar presence. The idea that humanity's future must be multiplanetary moved from science fiction into serious policy discussions. Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen returned as reluctant but powerful symbols of this new era. In the weeks and months that followed, they spoke to packed auditoriums, testified before Congress, and shared quiet moments with the next generation of explorers. They carried the same message. We went not as 4 individuals, but as representatives of 8 billion people. The moon belongs to all of us. The next steps are yours to take. The long deferral that began after Apollo 17 was finally over. Artemis had awakened. The goddess of the moon had answered humanity's call, and in doing so, she had rekindled a fire that had smoldered for more than 50 years. The footprint left in the Taurus-Littrow Valley in 1972 would no longer stand alone. New boots, and eventually habitats, rovers, and laboratories, would soon join it. Humanity had remembered why it once reached for the moon. And this time, we were not turning back. The stars were waiting. The mission was over, but the voices from the void would echo for generations. In the days and weeks following splashdown, the world listened closely as the crew of Artemis II shared their thoughts, not in prepared press conferences, but in quiet, unscripted moments that revealed the true heart of the journey. Reed Wiseman, Commander. I thought I understood what it meant to go to the moon. I didn't. Not until we swung behind that far side and the Earth disappeared. In that silence, you realize how small we are, and how extraordinary it is that we can reach beyond our cradle. We didn't just fly a mission. We carried every dreamer who ever looked up at the night sky. Victor Glover, pilot. Seeing Earth as that tiny, fragile marble changed me forever. Every border, every conflict, every difference we argue about down here, none of it is visible from that distance. We are one people on one planet. Artemis II reminded us that our future doesn't have to be limited to this beautiful blue world. We can, and we must, become a spacefaring civilization. Christina Koch, Mission Specialist. The moon is not a dead rock. It's a witness. It has watched us for billions of years. When we flew past its far side, I felt like we were finally saying, we're back, and this time we're staying. The data we brought home will help us live there sustainably. This mission wasn't the end of the story. It was the first sentence of the next chapter. Jeremy Hansen, Mission Specialist, CSA. From 250,000 miles away, you don't see countries. You see one fragile home. The moon gave us perspective. It showed us how interconnected we are and how much responsibility we carry. If we can work together to reach the moon again, imagine what else we can achieve when we truly decide to reach for the stars. These 4 voices, joined by millions watching from Earth, marked a turning point. The long silence that followed Apollo 17 had finally been broken. Humanity had proven it still possessed the courage, ingenuity, and vision to venture into deep space. The footprint in the lunar dust was no longer alone. As the Artemis program moves forward, toward permanent lunar bases, resource utilization, and the eventual journey to Mars, the crew of Artemis II will be remembered as the ones who rekindled the flame. They were not superheroes. They were engineers, pilots, scientists, and dreamers who trained for years, faced their fears, and stepped into the unknown so that others could follow. Their mission reminded us of a simple but powerful truth. We are a species defined by curiosity. We look up. We reach out. We explore. And when we do it together, across nations, backgrounds, and generations, there is almost nothing we cannot achieve. The moon is awake. Humanity is awakening with it. The journey has only just begun. The story of Artemis Awakens does not end on these pages. It continues with you. Look up tonight. Find the moon. Remember that 4 humans traveled there and back again in our lifetime. Let that truth ignite something inside you. To the dreamers and students. Study hard. Build things. Ask big questions. The next crew to land on the moon, or the first to step onto Mars, may be sitting in a classroom right now. To the engineers and scientists. Your ideas, your code, your experiments, and your innovations will shape the hardware and systems that carry us farther. The challenges of deep space are waiting for your solutions. To the leaders and policymakers. Support bold, sustained investment in space exploration. Make decisions that prioritize long-term human progress over short-term politics. The future of our species depends on it. To every person on Earth. Stay curious. Stay inspired. Demand more from ourselves than merely surviving on this planet. Encourage the next generation to reach higher, dream bigger, and never accept limits that can be broken. Because when we work together, across borders, backgrounds, and beliefs, we are capable of wonders. The moon is calling. The planets are waiting. And humanity is ready to answer. Let Artemis be the beginning. Now it's our turn. Go explore.